The frost had already claimed her by the time the sun began its slow climb over the Sierra Nevada, painting the snowdrift crimson where her blood had frozen into crystalline patterns that looked almost beautiful in the early light. Austin Quade had been riding since before dawn, his breath and his horses mingling in white clouds that dissipated into the bitter January air of 1884. He was heading back to his small ranch outside of Pahrump, Nevada, after a week spent in the mining camps further north where winter had hit hard and unforgiving. The drifts were deep this year, unusual for the Nevada territory, but the mountains cared nothing for what was usual. His gelding picked its way carefully through the snow, and Austin was thinking about hot coffee and his warm cabin when he saw what looked like a heap of fabric partially buried in white powder near a cluster of juniper trees. He almost rode past, almost convinced himself it was just an abandoned blanket or some traveler's lost pack. But something made him pull on the reins, something that prickled at the back of his neck like a warning. He dismounted, his boots crunching through the icy crust, and approached slowly. The closer he got, the more his stomach tightened with dread. It was a woman. She lay on her side, curled into herself, her dark hair spread across the snow like ink spilled on paper. Her lips were blue, her skin so pale it was almost translucent, and for a long moment Austin was certain she was dead. Then he saw the smallest movement, barely perceptible, as her chest rose and fell with a breath so shallow it was almost nothing at all. "Jesus Christ," he muttered, dropping to his knees beside her. His hands shook as he touched her neck, feeling for a pulse. It was there, faint and slow, like a dying bird's heartbeat. She was frozen nearly solid, her dress stiff with ice, and when he looked closer he could see the bruises on her face, the split lip, the way her hands were scraped raw and bleeding. Someone had done this to her. Someone had hurt her and left her here to die. Austin did not waste time trying to figure out who or why. He stripped off his heavy coat and wrapped it around her, then lifted her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, and her head lolled against his shoulder. He could feel how cold she was even through his clothes, could see the frost on her eyelashes. He had to get her warm, had to get her somewhere safe. His ranch was still 3 miles away, but there was an old line shack closer, maybe a mile to the west. It would have to do. He secured her on his horse as best he could, holding her against his chest with one arm while he guided the gelding with the other. Every second felt like an eternity. Her breathing remained so faint he kept checking to make sure she was still alive, pressing his fingers to her neck over and over to feel that thread-like pulse. The sun rose higher, but it brought no warmth. The wind cut through his shirt like knives, and he could only imagine how much worse it had been for her, lying there in the dark, alone and dying. The lined shack appeared like a blessing through the trees. It was small and crude, just 4 walls and a roof, but it had a stove and firewood stacked against one wall. Austin kicked the door open and carried her inside, laying her carefully on the single bunk that sagged in the corner. His hands moved with practiced efficiency as he got a fire going in the stove, coaxing the flames higher until heat began to fill the small space. He knew about cold, knew that warming someone too fast could kill them. But he also knew that leaving her frozen would finish what whoever hurt her had started. He worked her clothes off carefully, trying not to look more than necessary, but needing to get the frozen fabric away from her skin. Her dress was torn in places, and there were more bruises underneath, purple and yellow marks on her ribs and arms. Rage burned hot in his chest, but he pushed it down. Focus on keeping her alive first. Justice could come later. He wrapped her in his blankets, then in his coat again, and began rubbing her hands and feet gently, trying to restore circulation. Her fingers were so cold they felt like marble. He kept checking her breathing, kept watching for any sign of change. Minutes stretched into an hour. Then 2. The fire crackled and popped, filling the shack with warmth, and slowly, so slowly, color began to return to her face. It was afternoon before she stirred. Her eyelids fluttered and she made a small sound in the back of her throat. Austin leaned forward, his heart pounding. "Miss, can you hear me? You are safe now. You are going to be all right." Her eyes opened, and they were the color of storm clouds, gray and confused. She stared at him for a long moment, and then her whole body went rigid. She tried to scramble back to get away from him, and panic flooded her features. "No, no, it is all right," Austin said quickly, holding up his hands. "I am not going to hurt you. I found you in the snow. You were freezing. I brought you here to get warm." She was shaking violently now, whether from cold or fear he could not tell. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out at first. When she finally spoke, her voice was rough and broken. "Where am I?" "A line shack about 4 miles north of Pahrump. I am Austin Quade. I have a ranch nearby." "What is your name?" She closed her eyes and tears leaked from the corners. "Thea," she whispered. "Thea Carmichael." "What happened to you, Miss Carmichael?" The tears came harder now, and she wrapped her arms around herself. "He tried to kill me. He said if he could not have me, nobody could. He beat me and left me out there. I tried to walk, tried to find help, but I got lost in the dark. I thought I was going to die." Austin felt that rage surge again, hotter this time. Who did this?" "My husband." The word came out like poison. Daniel Carmichael. We have been married 3 months. I thought I knew him. I thought he was a good man. But he changed. He got jealous, violent. Last night I told him I was leaving, going back to my family in California. He lost his mind." Austin sat back on his heels, processing this. A husband. That complicated things. Legally, a man had rights over his wife, even if those rights should not extend to trying to murder her. But Austin had never been much for legal niceties when they ran counter to basic decency. "Where is he now?" "I do not know. He rode off after he left me in the snow. Maybe he went back to town. Maybe he ran." She looked at Austin with those gray eyes, and there was something in them that made his chest ache. "You should not have saved me. He will come after me. He will finish what he started." "Not while I am alive, he will not," Austin said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. "You are under my protection now, Miss Carmichael. That bastard wants to get to you. He is going to have to go through me first." She studied his face for a long moment, as if trying to determine whether he meant what he said. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because some of the tension left her body. "Why would you do this? You do not even know me." "Because it is the right thing to do, and because nobody deserves what was done to you." He stood up, checking the fire. "You need rest. You need food. And you need to heal. We can worry about everything else after that." Over the next few hours, Austin did what he could to make her comfortable. He had some jerky and hardtack in his saddlebags, along with a canteen of water. It was not much, but she ate slowly, carefully, wincing every time she swallowed. Her throat must have been hurt when he grabbed her. Her hands shook as she drank, and Austin had to look away from the bruises around her wrists, the marks where someone had held her down. As evening approached, he knew he needed to make a decision. They could not stay in the line shack indefinitely. But taking her into Pahrump was risky if her husband was there. And his ranch, while closer, was isolated. If Carmichael came looking, there would be no one to help. "I need to know more about your husband," he said gently. "What does he do? Does he have friends in town? Men who might help him?" Thea pulled the blanket tighter around herself. She looked small and fragile, but there was steel in her eyes now, a determination that had not been there before. "He works at the mercantile, or he did. He is friends with some of the minors, the rough ones who drink too much and start fights. I do not think they would help him kill someone, but I do not know for sure. I thought I knew him, and I was wrong about everything." Austin nodded slowly. "All right. Here is what we are going to do. Tomorrow, when you are stronger, we are going to ride to my ranch. It is defensible, and I have guns and ammunition. We will send word to the marshal in the next county over. If Carmichael is in Pahrump, the law will deal with him." "The law?" Thea laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The law will tell me to go back to my husband. They will say it is a domestic matter. They will say he has the right to discipline me as he sees fit." "Not this marshal. Sam Fletcher is a good man. He has daughters of his own. He will listen." Thea looked like she wanted to believe him, but could not quite manage it. Austin could not blame her. She had been betrayed by the man who promised to love and protect her. Trust would not come easy now. They spent the night in the line shack, Austin keeping the fire going and watching over her while she slept fitfully, crying out sometimes in dreams. Each time she woke in panic, he spoke softly to her until she remembered where she was, until she remembered she was safe. By morning, she looked a little better. The color had returned fully to her face, and though she moved stiffly, obviously in pain, she was able to stand and walk. The ride to Austin's ranch was slow and careful. He kept Thea in front of him on the horse, one arm around her waist to keep her steady. She did not protest, though he could feel how tense she was, how aware of his proximity. He tried to make himself as unthreatening as possible, keeping his touch light, his voice calm. The ranch came into view around mid-morning. It was not much, just a small cabin with a barn and a corral, but Austin had built it himself over the past 5 years, and he was proud of it. He had 20 head of cattle, a few horses, and enough land to make a decent living. It was a simple life, a quiet life, and until today he had been content with it. He helped Thea down from the horse and led her inside. The cabin was one large room with a loft above. There was a stone fireplace, a bed in the corner, a table with 2 chairs, and a small kitchen area. It was clean and well kept if sparse. Thea looked around with an expression he could not quite read. "It is not much," he said, suddenly self-conscious. "It is more than I have right now," she replied softly. "Thank you." Over the next few days, they fell into a strange routine. Austin gave Thea his bed and slept in the loft. He cooked simple meals and she ate slowly, her appetite returning bit by bit. She did not talk much at first, spending long hours staring into the fire, lost in thoughts he could not fathom. But gradually, she began to open up. She told him about her life before Daniel Carmichael. She had grown up in Sacramento, the daughter of a school teacher. Her mother had died when she was young, and her father had raised her alone. She had been educated, could read and write and do figures, and had worked as a teacher herself before meeting Daniel. He had seemed kind and attentive during their courtship. He had promised her a good life. The truth had revealed itself only after the wedding, when the kindness turned to possessiveness, the attention to control. "He did not like me talking to other men," she said one evening as they sat by the fire. "Even in passing, even in the course of normal business. He accused me of things, terrible things. I tried to reassure him, tried to be a good wife, but nothing was ever enough. The first time he hit me, he cried afterward and begged forgiveness. I believed him when he said it would never happen again. But it did, again and again. Each time worse than the last." Austin listened without interrupting, his jaw tight. He had known men like Daniel Carmichael, men who used their fists to solve problems, who saw women as property. He had never understood it, never understood how someone could hurt the person they claimed to love. "You did nothing wrong," he said firmly. "You know that, right? None of this was your fault." Thea looked at him with those gray eyes, and he saw the uncertainty there. I keep thinking if I had just been different, if I had just tried harder. No. Austin leaned forward, his voice intense. There is nothing you could have done. Men like that, they are broken inside. They will always find a reason to justify their cruelty. You could have been perfect, and he still would have hurt you. She was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. How did you become so wise about such things? My father was a drunk. He used to beat my mother when he was in his cups. I was too young to stop him, too small. I used to hide under the bed and listen to her cry. When I was 14, he came home one night meaner than usual. I was bigger by then. I stood between him and her, and I told him if he ever touched her again, I would kill him. He believed me. He left the next day, and we never saw him again. My mother died 2 years later from a fever, but at least she had those 2 years of peace. Thea reached out hesitantly, then placed her hand over his. I am sorry. So am I. He looked down at her hand on his, small and warm. Something stirred in his chest, something he had not felt in a long time. But it taught me that sometimes you have to stand up to the darkness. Sometimes you have to fight. 3 days after Austin brought Thea to his ranch, a rider came. Austin saw him from the window, approaching slowly up the road. He was a big man on a big horse, and even from a distance, Austin could see the anger in the set of his shoulders. Get in the loft, he told Thea quietly. Take this. He handed her a small pistol. You know how to use it, she nodded, her face pale. It is him. It is Daniel. I figured. Stay up there and stay quiet. I will handle this. Austin watched her climb the ladder, then checked his rifle and stepped outside. He stood on the porch, the rifle held loosely in his hands, and waited. Daniel Carmichael rode up and stopped 20 feet away. He was handsome in a rough way, with dark hair and a strong jaw, but his eyes were cold and mean. I am looking for my wife, he said without preamble. I heard you found a woman in the snow. That is my Thea. I have come to take her home. The woman I found was nearly dead, Austin replied evenly. Beaten and left to freeze. I do not think she wants to go anywhere with the man who did that to her. Daniel's face darkened. That is between me and my wife. The law says she belongs to me. You got no right to keep her. The law also says you cannot murder someone, even if she is your wife. You tried to kill her. I'm not handing her over to a killer. You calling me a killer? Daniel swung down from his horse, his hand moving toward the gun at his hip. You got no idea what you are getting into, mister. That woman is mine. I have every right to discipline her as I see fit. Discipline? Austin laughed, but there was no humor in it. You beat her until she could barely stand, then left her in the snow to die. That is not discipline. That is attempted murder, and you are not getting near her again. Daniel took a step forward, his hand now resting on his gun. Last chance. Give me my wife or I will take her. Austin raised the rifle, aiming it squarely at Daniel's chest. You are welcome to try, but I promise you will not walk away from here. For a long moment they stood there, two men on the edge of violence. Austin could feel his heart pounding, could feel the weight of the decision he was making. He was not a violent man by nature. He had only killed once before, a rabid wolf that had been threatening his cattle. But he knew without doubt that he would pull this trigger if Daniel forced his hand. He would kill this man to protect Thea. Daniel must have seen that certainty in his eyes because he took a step back. This is not over. I will go to the marshal. I will have the law on my side. Go ahead. Marshal Fletcher is a fair man. I am sure he will be very interested in hearing about what you did to your wife. Daniel spat on the ground, his face twisted with hatred. She has poisoned you against me. That is what she does. She lies and manipulates. You will see. You will see what she really is, and then you will wish you had given her back to me. He mounted his horse and rode away, but Austin did not lower the rifle until he was out of sight. Only then did he allow himself to breathe. He heard Thea climbing down from the loft, and when he turned, she was standing there with tears streaming down her face. "You stood up to him," she whispered. "No one has ever stood up to him for me." Austin set the rifle aside and crossed to her. Without thinking, he pulled her into his arms, and she came willingly, pressing her face against his chest. He could feel her shaking, could feel the rapid beat of her heart. "I meant what I said. He is not getting near you. I will protect you, Thea. I swear it." She pulled back just enough to look up at him, and something passed between them in that moment, something electric and profound. Austin felt like he had been struck by lightning. He was falling for her. Against all reason, against all sense, he was falling for this broken, beautiful woman who had crashed into his life. "I need to ride to the next county and talk to Marshal Fletcher," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "I will leave you with provisions and the rifle. You keep the doors locked and do not open them for anyone but me. I will be back by tomorrow night at the latest." Thea nodded, still holding on to him. "Please be careful. Daniel is dangerous. He will not give up. Neither will I." The ride to the county seat took most of the day. Austin pushed his horse hard, urgency driving him. He found Marshal Fletcher in his office, a grizzled man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Austin told him everything, holding nothing back. Fletcher listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker as the story unfolded. "Daniel Carmichael," he said when Austin finished. "I know the name. Had some complaints about him from other towns. Nothing anyone would press charges on, but enough to make me wary. You did right bringing this to me." "What can you do?" Austin asked. "Legally, she is still his wife. Legally, attempted murder trumps marital rights. I will ride to Pahrump tomorrow and have a talk with Mr. Carmichael. If the story holds up, and I have no reason to think it would not given what you have told me, I will arrest him. He will stand trial." Relief flooded through Austin. "Thank you, Marshal." Fletcher studied him with those sharp eyes. "You are taking a risk getting involved in this. Carmichael has friends. They might not take kindly to you interfering. I do not care. What he did was wrong. Someone had to stand up for her. That is admirable, but be careful. Men like Carmichael, they do not go down easy. Watch your back." Austin rode through the night to get back to his ranch, an uneasy feeling gnawing at his gut. The cabin was dark when he arrived, and for a terrible moment he feared the worst. Then Thea appeared at the window, lamp in hand, and relief washed over him again. She opened the door, and he could see she had not slept. "You came back. I said I would." He stepped inside, suddenly aware of how exhausted he was. "Fletcher is going to arrest Daniel. It is going to be all right." Thea crossed to him and took his hands in hers. "You look dead on your feet. Sit down. Let me make you something to eat." It felt strange and wonderful to be cared for. Austin sat at the table and watched her move around his kitchen, brewing coffee and warming up leftover stew. She moved with growing confidence, the haunted look fading from her eyes bit by bit. When she set the food in front of him, their fingers brushed, and the contact sent a jolt through him. "Thank you," he said softly, "for this, for everything." "I should be thanking you," she replied, sitting down across from him. "You saved my life. You have given me a chance to start over." "What will you do after the trial?" Thea was quiet for a moment. "I do not know. I thought about going back to California to my father, but I have not spoken to him since I married Daniel. He did not approve of the marriage. He said there was something wrong with Daniel, something dark. I did not listen. I was too proud. I do not know if he would even want to see me now. I am sure he would. You are his daughter. Maybe," she looked down at her hands, "or maybe I will stay here. Nevada has been better to me than any man ever was, present company excluded." Austin felt his heart skip. You would stay in Pahrump. Not in Pahrump, too many memories there, but nearby. Maybe I could teach again. There must be children who need schooling. There are. My nearest neighbors have 3 young ones running wild with no education. They would pay for a teacher. Thea smiled, and it transformed her face. Austin realized it was the first time he had seen her truly smile. Then maybe that is what I will do. Marshal Fletcher arrived 5 days later with news. Daniel Carmichael had been arrested without incident and was awaiting trial. Several other women had come forward with stories of his violence, including a previous wife Austin had not known existed. The evidence against him was overwhelming. He will hang, Fletcher said bluntly. Or at best spend the rest of his life in prison. Either way, Miss Carmichael, you are free of him. Thea had gone very still at the news. Austin watched her carefully, trying to read her expression. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. Good. He deserves whatever he gets. I just hope no other woman has to suffer because of him. After Fletcher left, Thea walked outside and stood looking at the mountains in the distance. Austin followed, unsure what to say. Are you all right? I do not know, she admitted. I thought I would feel happy, relieved, and I do. But I also feel guilty, like I should have done something sooner, should have warned someone about what he was capable of. You were trying to survive. You do not owe anyone an apology for that. She turned to him, and there were tears in her eyes. You are a good man, Austin Quade. Better than I deserve. That is not true. He reached out and gently wiped away a tear with his thumb. You deserve every good thing this world has to offer. She leaned into his touch, and he found himself cupping her face in his hands. They stood there for a long moment, the air between them charged with possibility. Austin wanted to kiss her more than he had ever wanted anything, but he held back. She had been through too much. She needed time to heal, not to be pushed into something new before she was ready. As if reading his mind, Thea stepped back. I am not ready, she said softly. Not yet, but someday I might be. I can wait, Austin said, and he meant it. I can wait as long as you need. The weeks passed, turning into months. Spring came to Nevada, melting the snow and bringing green to the high desert. Thea stayed at the ranch, sleeping in the cabin while Austin remained in the loft. They fell into an easy companionship, working side by side during the day and talking long into the nights. Austin learned everything about her, her favorite books and songs, her dreams for the future, her fears and hopes. And she learned about him, his quiet determination, his dry sense of humor, the loneliness he had carried for so long. Thea started teaching the neighbor children, and word spread. Soon she had a dozen students coming to the ranch twice a week. Austin built her a small schoolhouse on his property, a simple structure but sturdy. He watched her with those children, patient and kind, drawing out their curiosity and intelligence, and he fell more in love with her every day. She was healing. He could see it in the way she smiled more easily, laughed more freely. The nightmares came less frequently, and when they did, Austin was there to comfort her until she fell back asleep. They did not speak about what was growing between them, but it was there, undeniable and strong. Daniel Carmichael's trial came in June. Thea insisted on attending, on facing him one last time. Austin went with her, sitting beside her in the courtroom as witness after witness testified to Daniel's cruelty. When it was Thea's turn to speak, she stood tall and proud and told her story without flinching. Daniel stared at her with pure hatred, but she did not look away. The jury deliberated for less than an hour, guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 15 years hard labor. He would not die, but he would suffer. Justice, imperfect but real, had been served. Outside the courthouse, Thea took a deep breath of free air. It is over, she said wonderingly. It is really over. It is, Austin agreed. "What do you want to do now?" She looked at him, and there was something new in her eyes, something warm and certain. "I want to go home, to California." "No." She took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "Home, to the ranch, with you." Austin felt his breath catch. "Thea, I am ready," she said simply. "I have been ready for weeks now. I was just scared. Scared of being hurt again, scared of trusting someone. But I trust you, Austin. I love you." The world seemed to stop. Austin stared at her, at this incredible woman who had survived so much, who was offering him everything. "I love you too," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I have loved you since the day I found you in the snow. I will love you until the day I die." He kissed her then, right there on the street, and she kissed him back with all the passion and hope and joy that had been building between them. People stared, but Austin did not care. Nothing mattered except this moment, this woman, this future spreading out before them like a promise. They were married a week later in a simple ceremony at the church in Pahrump. Thea wore a dress of pale blue, her dark hair crowned with wildflowers. Austin wore his best suit and could not stop smiling. The neighbors came, and Marshall Fletcher, and even some of Thea's students with their families. It was small and perfect. Their wedding night was gentle and tender. Austin had worried about triggering bad memories, but Thea came to him without fear, trusting him completely. They made love slowly, learning each other's bodies, and afterward Thea cried, but they were good tears, healing tears. "I never knew it could be like this," she whispered against his chest. "I never knew it could be beautiful." "It can be," Austin assured her, holding her close. "It should be, always." Life settled into a new rhythm. Thea continued teaching while Austin worked the ranch. They talked about expanding, maybe getting more cattle, building a bigger house. They talked about children someday when Thea felt ready. There was no rush. They had all the time in the world. One evening in late summer, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and red. Thea leaned against Austin's shoulder, his arm around her waist. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly. "Saving me that day?" Austin looked down at her, incredulous. "Regret the best thing that ever happened to me, not for a single second. Even though it complicated your life, even though it put you in danger, especially because of that. You are worth any complication, any danger. You are worth everything." He kissed the top of her head. "Besides, I am the one who got the better end of the deal. A beautiful wife, a ready-made school on my property raising the property value, and the best company a man could ask for." Thea laughed, that free, joyous sound he loved so much. "When you put it that way, I suppose you did get a good bargain." "The best bargain," he agreed, pulling her closer. As fall arrived, Thea began to feel unwell. At first she thought it was just a stomach ailment, but when it persisted, Austin insisted she see the doctor in the next town over. She returned home with news that left them both stunned and overjoyed. "I am going to have a baby," she announced, her eyes shining. "The doctor says probably in early spring." Austin swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to stop. "A baby. We are going to have a baby." That night, lying in bed with his hand resting on her still flat stomach, Austin felt a contentment so deep it almost hurt. "Are you scared?" he asked softly. "A little," Thea admitted. "But mostly I am happy. This baby will be born into love, raised with kindness. It will never know the darkness I knew. We will make sure of that." "We will," Austin promised. "We will give this child everything we never had. Love and safety and a home full of laughter." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Thea continued teaching until she grew too large and uncomfortable, then spent her days preparing the cabin for the baby's arrival. Austin built a cradle from pine, sanding it until it was smooth as silk. The neighbor women came bearing gifts, tiny clothes and blankets and advice. The community that had seemed so distant when Austin first arrived had embraced them both, accepting their story and celebrating their happiness. Winter returned to Nevada, but this time when the snow fell, it felt magical rather than threatening. Austin made sure the cabin was warm and well stocked. He hardly left Thea's side as her time drew near, anxious and protective. She laughed at his hovering but secretly loved it, loved knowing she was cherished and cared for. The baby came on a cold March morning in 1885, just as the sun was rising. The same neighbor women who had brought gifts now came to help with the birth, shooing Austin outside despite his protests. He paced the yard for hours, listening to the sounds from inside and praying harder than he ever had in his life. When one of the women finally emerged, she was smiling. "You can come in now, you have a son." A son. Austin's legs felt weak as he walked inside. Thea was propped up in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blue blanket. She looked up at him with such love it nearly broke his heart. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Austin sat carefully on the edge of the bed and looked down at the baby. He was perfect, small and red-faced with a shock of dark hair. As Austin watched, the baby opened his eyes and they were gray like his mother's. "He is beautiful," Austin whispered, afraid to speak louder and break the spell. "You are beautiful. I cannot believe he is ours." "What should we name him?" Thea asked. Austin thought for a moment. "Samuel, after Marshall Fletcher. He helped save you. He helped give us this life." Thea smiled. "Samuel Quade, I like that. It is strong." Samuel proved to be a healthy, happy baby. He cried, of course, keeping them up many nights, but Austin did not mind. He would walk the floor with his son, singing old songs his mother had sung to him, and feel a peace he had never imagined possible. Thea would watch them from the bed, her heart full. As Samuel grew, so did their life. Austin expanded the ranch, buying more land and cattle. Thea returned to teaching, with Samuel sleeping in a basket nearby while she instructed her students. They built a proper schoolhouse in Pahrump, and Thea became the official town teacher, respected and beloved. When Samuel was 2, Thea became pregnant again. This time a daughter, born in the summer with blonde hair and Austin's green eyes. They named her Rose after Thea's mother. Samuel was fascinated by his baby sister, always wanting to help, to hold her, to make her laugh. The years passed in a blur of joy and hard work and small moments of perfect happiness. Samuel grew into a strong, kind boy who loved horses and wanted to be a rancher like his father. Rose was clever and bookish, always asking questions, always curious about the world. Austin and Thea watched their children grow with pride and gratitude. Thea Carmichael died in prison when Samuel was 5. Word reached them through Marshall Fletcher, who made the journey to tell them personally. Thea received the news with equanimity. "I stopped thinking about him years ago," she told Austin later. "He has no power over me anymore. He never will again." Austin understood. The past was the past. They had built something new and good from the ashes of Thea's old life. Thea Carmichael was just a ghost, fading further with each passing year. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Austin took Thea back to the spot where he had found her that winter morning so long ago. The drift was gone, replaced by summer grass and wildflowers. They stood there holding hands, remembering. "I was so scared," Thea said softly. "I thought I was going to die there. I had given up hope. I am glad you held on just a little longer, glad I decided to investigate that shape in the snow." Austin turned to her, cupping her face in his hands the way he had that first time. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, you and our children, this life we built together." "You saved me," Thea said, her eyes bright with tears. "In every way a person can be saved. You gave me love when I thought I would never trust again. You gave me safety. You gave me a future. You saved me too. I did not even know how lonely I was until you came into my life, how empty everything was. You filled all those empty spaces." They kissed there among the wildflowers, two people who had found each other against all odds, who had chosen love over fear, hope over despair. The sun shone warm on their faces, and somewhere in the distance they could hear their children laughing as they played near the wagon. More years passed. Samuel grew into a young man and fell in love with the daughter of a neighboring rancher. Austin helped him build his own cabin on the far edge of their property, gave him cattle to start his own herd. Rose went away to school, returning with a teaching certificate and dreams of opening a school for girls. Thea helped her realize that dream, and together they founded a small academy in Pahrump. Austin and Thea grew older together, their hair turning gray, their bodies moving slower. But their love never diminished. If anything, it deepened, became richer and more complex with every shared experience, every challenge overcome together. They sat on their porch in the evenings, watching grandchildren play in the yard, and marveled at the life they had built. "Do you remember that first night?" Thea asked one evening when they were both in their 60s. "In the lined shack." "I remember everything," Austin replied. "I remember thinking you were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen, even half frozen and barely alive. I remember being terrified you would not make it. I remember waking up and being so scared. And then I saw your face and something in me recognized you, recognized that you were safe, that you were good." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I knew even then, I think. I knew you were going to change my life. We changed each other's lives. That is what love does." Samuel had taken over most of the ranch work by now, and Rose's school was thriving. Austin and Thea found themselves with time they had never had before, time to just be together. They took long walks, exploring the land they had called home for so many years. They visited the spot where Austin had found Thea every anniversary, a pilgrimage to remember where they had started. When Austin was 68, he fell ill with a fever. Thea nursed him through it with the same fierce determination he had shown when he saved her life all those years ago. She sat by his bedside day and night, wiping his brow, forcing medicine down his throat, refusing to let him go. And he recovered, though it took months before he was fully strong again. "You cannot leave me yet," Thea told him during his recovery. "We still have too much living to do." "I am not going anywhere," Austin promised. "I plan to be around to annoy you for at least another 20 years. "Only 20, I was hoping for 30. They laughed together and Austin pulled her down for a kiss. "30 it is then, I will hold you to that." They almost made it. Austin lived to be 82, healthy and active until the very end. He died peacefully in his sleep one spring night, Thea beside him as she had been for over 40 years. She held his hand and whispered that she loved him, that she would see him again, that he had been the love of her life and her salvation. Samuel and Rose came immediately when word spread. They found their mother sitting beside their father's body, calm and composed. "He had a good life," she told them. "We had a good life together. I will not diminish that with excessive grief. He would not want that." But in private she mourned. She mourned the loss of her companion, her friend, her love. The ranch felt empty without Austin's presence, too quiet without his voice. Samuel offered to have her move in with his family, but Thea refused. "This is my home. This is where Austin and I built our life. I will stay here." She lived for 5 more years, teaching until the very end, spending time with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She told them stories about their grandfather, about the cowboy who had found her in the snow and changed her life. She made sure they understood the importance of kindness, of standing up for what was right, of choosing love even when it was hard. On a cold winter morning, very much like the one when Austin had found her, Thea passed away in her sleep. She was 87 years old. Her children found her in the bed she had shared with Austin, a peaceful expression on her face. On her nightstand was a letter, written in her still elegant hand. "I am not afraid," it read. "I am going to him now, to the man who saved me and loved me and gave me everything. Tell my children and grandchildren that I loved them. Tell them to be brave, to be kind, to choose hope over fear. And tell them that love is the greatest adventure of all, worth any risk, any hardship. It was for me. It always will be." They buried her next to Austin on a hill overlooking the ranch. Their grandchildren carved headstones from local stone, simple but beautiful. Austin's read, "He saved her life." Thea's read, "She gave him love." And between them, a single phrase applied to both: "Together forever." The ranch passed to Samuel, and he ran it well, teaching his own children the lessons his parents had taught him. Rose's school grew and flourished, educating generations of young women. The story of Austin and Thea became legend in Pahrump, told and retold until it took on mythic proportions. The cowboy who found a dying woman in the snow and loved her until his last breath. The woman who survived the unsurvivable and built a life of joy from ashes. But for those who knew them, who loved them, the story was simpler and more profound. It was about two people who found each other when they needed it most. About choosing compassion over indifference, love over fear. About building something beautiful from broken pieces. It was about sunrise in the snow and the hand that reached down to pull someone back from death. About warmth in the cold, light in the darkness, hope when all seemed lost. It was about a love that defied odds and outlasted time, a love that created ripples spreading outward through generations. It was about Thea and Austin, about the life they built, and the family they created, and the love that sustained them through everything. And in the end, that was the only story that mattered. The story of two hearts beating as one from that frozen morning until forever. Years later, when Samuel was an old man himself, he took his grandchildren to the spot where his father had found his mother. Wildflowers bloomed there every spring without fail, though no one planted them. The children ran through the grass, laughing and playing while Samuel stood remembering. He thought about his father, teaching him to ride, to rope, to treat animals and people with respect. He thought about his mother, reading to him by firelight, teaching him his letters, showing him that knowledge was power and kindness was strength. He thought about the love they had shared, so obvious and real that everyone who met them could feel it. "Tell us the story, Grandpa," one of the children begged. "Tell us about how Grandpa Austin found Grandma Thea." So Samuel told it again, this love story that had shaped his entire life. He told it with reverence and joy, painting the picture with words until the children could almost see that frozen morning, that desperate moment, that choice to stop and help that changed everything. "And they loved each other?" a little girl asked when he finished. "Really, truly loved each other?" "Really, truly," Samuel confirmed. "Until their last breaths and beyond. That is the kind of love you should look for, the kind that saves you and lifts you up and makes you better. The kind my parents had." The children nodded solemnly, taking this wisdom into their young hearts. And the story continued, passed from generation to generation, a testament to what love could do, what love could be when two people were brave enough to reach for it. In the end, that frozen morning in 1884 was not an ending at all. It was a beginning. The beginning of a love story that would echo through time, inspiring others to be brave, to be kind, to believe in second chances and new beginnings. The beginning of a legacy built on compassion and courage and the simple truth that sometimes the most important thing you can do is stop for someone who needs help. Austin had stopped. He had helped, and in doing so, he had not just saved Thea's life. He had saved his own, finding the love and purpose he had not even known he was missing. Together, they had built something extraordinary from that moment of crisis, something that lasted long after they were gone. The sun set over the Nevada desert, painting the sky in brilliant colors, and Samuel gathered his grandchildren to head home. But he looked back once at that spot among the wildflowers, and he could almost see them. His parents, young and in love, standing hand in hand. His father with his quiet strength, his mother with her radiant smile. Together as they had always been. Together as they would always be. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying with it the echo of a promise made long ago. A promise to love, to protect, to cherish. A promise kept for over 40 years and beyond death itself. A promise that lived on in the children and grandchildren they had left behind, in the stories told and retold, in the values passed down through generations. Thea and Austin were gone, but they were not forgotten. They lived on in every act of kindness their descendants performed, in every hand reached out to help someone in need, in every heart that chose love over fear. They lived on in the very land itself, in the ranch that still bore their name, in the school that Thea had founded, in the community they had helped build. And on cold winter mornings, when the snow fell soft and silent over Nevada, people said you could still feel them there. The cowboy and his lady, forever walking the land they loved, forever together. A love story that began in desperation and ended in triumph, that started with death's cold touch and blossomed into life abundant. That was their legacy. That was their gift to the world. The proof that love could conquer anything, that hope could survive the darkest night, that one person's choice to care could change everything. Austin had found Thea barely breathing in the snow at sunrise, and he had given her life. She had given him love in return, and together they had created something that would never die. A family, a legacy, a story worth telling. And so it was told and would be told for as long as hearts could love and voices could speak. The story of the cowboy and the woman in the snow. The story of Austin and Thea Carmichael. The story of a love that saved two broken souls and made them whole.